All right, good evening, everyone. How are we? Doing all right. Hey, I don't know if you've noticed, but it seems like just like in a moment, summer went away, right? Like suddenly it was kind of chilly outside. Dusted off a jacket today. I was like, hey, listen, it's finally not burning up like, oh my goodness, hot. And that's wonderful. Anyone else enjoying the little bit cooler weather? Okay, good. For me, that is not only an indication that it's hitting fall, but it's also that we're hitting the most wonderful time of the year, and that is not Christmas. It is football season, right? So that's where we're at right now. Football season begins, and for me, this is always been okay. I'm watching the games and I'm kind of watching what's going on all through college, my adult life. But if you take it back to high school, I also call the glory days, when I played football and was in shape and could run to the back of this room without needing a glass of water. Like that was the glory days. And so the fall was always kind of the time where we played, where we see like we trained all year, we practiced all year. Let's see if we're actually any good. And any of you who have played sports know this. That there's times where you're playing the game, right? There's times where you're actually doing the point of the thing. And then there's times you're training. You're in the weight room, you're running on the track, you're eating healthy, you're kind of taking care of your body so that you can go and play the game. And I was just thinking about it this week as I was thinking about, okay, it would be really pointless if you became this person who was unbelievably good at training, but had no ability to translate that into a game. Like if you were the football player who can bench 400 pounds, that is awesome. But if you can't make a tackle on the field, you've missed the point. If you're a basketball player who has a 40-inch vertical and you can jump, you got hops. Like I don't, that person does, you've got hops, but you can't pull down a rebound or hit a jump shot, you've missed the point. If you're this high school or college athlete or you're a pro baseball player and you've got the best swing and your form is impeccable, but you can't actually hit a baseball, you've missed the point. So here's what all of us understand intuitively. There is a difference between training and playing the game. And someone can be profoundly good at training, but not actually that good at playing the game. And why I'm saying this is because tonight we're going to begin a brand new series where we're going to look at what it means to live and love like Jesus in our relationships. Not like a romantic relationship, just every relationship and every person we encounter. And here would be the burden of the pastors of this church for the people of this church. That would go from our children all the way up through our middle school and high school, all the way up for our adults and young adults. Our concern is this, that there are Christians, and maybe even Christians at this church, who are really good at training, but can't translate that into the game. Here's what I mean. I think there are Christians, and maybe some of you come in here and you know every word to the songs. You sing the songs, you don't even need the lyrics up on the screen because you know them, like you know how to do the church thing. But then you go home tonight to your roommates and you treat them terribly. Like I worry that there are Christians, and maybe even Christians in this room, where you're like a Bible pro. You read your Bible all the time. You have a quiet time with a cup of coffee and a journal. You put it on your Instagram story. Everyone knows you're doing it. You've read the recent Francis Chan book. Like you've read Bob Goff's book 4 times. You quote it most days. Like that's you. You read all the material. But then when it actually comes to the way you treat your family when you go home to see them, it doesn't look Christian at all. Like I worry for the people that you're at every church event we do, and you come to church all the time. You basically live here. You've rented a spot out in the lot. You have a little cot here at the church. You just spend all your time here, but you've never actually invited anyone to join you. Like I worry that there are Christians, and possibly even Christians in this room, that are really good at training. They're really good in the gym. You're really good on the track. But when you actually get into the game, it doesn't translate. See, ultimately for our faith, maybe you've never stopped to consider this. The ultimate evidence that you are walking in faithfulness to Jesus is not your religious activities, that the ultimate evidence is how your faith shapes your relationships. That it would deeply shape the way you relate to people. And over the next 6 weeks, my desire is to talk about this side of things. Like I know that there are so many of you who are passionate about worship. You read your Bible, you show up at church, you pray with a fervency that I just desire even for myself. I see that. And my desire is that would play out, not in some spectacular, wild, and crazy way, but in the everyday relationships of your life. Just want to invite as many of you as I can to the next 6 weeks. We're going to be on this journey. We take 6 weeks to look at what it means to live and love like Jesus in our everyday relationships. In the average, ordinary relationships of your family and your friends and your roommates and your coworkers, the people in your classes and the people on your teams and the people you see every day. My hope is that this challenges us not just to be good at the training side of things, but to be good at what matters most. And that's how we love people. So if you have your Bible with you today, we're going to open up to Matthew chapter 26. That's where we'll be this evening. If you don't have a Bible, it'll be here up on the screens. You can also use your phones. If you have one of those books, and I don't know that we distributed them, but if you ultimately grab one, there's pages to take notes. There's pages to sort of apply some of this. I would encourage you by the end of the night to grab one of these Engage notebooks and scribble in it as we go through this series. So here's how it begins. Matthew chapter 26, verse 45 begins this way. It says, then he, and this is Jesus, it says, then he returned to the disciples and said, are you still sleeping and resting? Look, the hour has come and the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer. So I don't want to assume that everyone here grew up in church, or that you know exactly what's happening here. So for the sake of the people who maybe don't know what's happening, here's what's going on. Jesus goes to his disciples and said, are you still sleeping and resting? If you haven't read the Gospels, these stories about Jesus' life, the disciples are the most encouraging characters, not because they're awesome, but because they fall asleep while they're praying. All right? Right? Like, this is what happens here. I just go like, yes, I know what that's like. Like you're Lord and you're gone. And this is just, they're just average, ordinary people. The disciples aren't these spectacular superheroes. They're just 12 guys that Jesus said, hey, come follow me. And they're like, sounds good. And they do. And they follow him and they fall asleep all the time. It says, look, the hour has come. The Son of Man, Jesus refers to himself as the Son of Man. He says, is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer. Jesus has taken these 12 guys. He spent 3 years with them. But everyone knows, because Jesus has been telling them, that this is not going to end well for Jesus. Jesus is aware that this is going to end poorly for him. He's told his disciples, and so he tells them, this is going to end poorly for me, so you should pray. They start praying, they fall asleep. Jesus goes, wake up, I'm about to get arrested. This is what's about to happen. This is really the very end of Jesus' life. This is the very end, right before Jesus goes to the cross. Here's how it continues. It goes on this way. It says in verse 47, he says, while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd armed with swords and clubs sent from the chief priests and the elders of the people. So Jesus has 12 disciples. 11 of them seem to kind of be on board with what he's doing, but this one guy named Judas, somewhere along the way, becomes disenfranchised. He becomes disillusioned with what's going on with Jesus. He thinks Jesus has kind of lost his way a little bit, and so he gets this offer from what it says, the chief priests and the elders of the people. The people who are most threatened by Jesus, the people who Jesus kind of puts off. Jesus shows up on the scene and these people don't like him, and so they're looking to kill him. But they know they can't arrest him during the day, because during the day he's in the middle of the city and everyone seems to like him. So they know they need to find him at night. And this isn't like finding people now. This isn't like Find My iPhone Jesus. This is like somewhere in Jerusalem. There's very few lights anywhere, and they're trying to find this man. And so Judas agrees to betray Jesus. He agrees to say, hey, listen, he's going to be here this night, and if you go find him, I'll lead you straight to him. And it says that Judas rolls in not alone, but with a large crowd armed with swords and clubs. There's people coming at Jesus, and they're looking to make trouble. They are looking to make trouble with Jesus, and since that day, it has never stopped. It's never stopped. As much as I can, I'm just going to be the guy week after week who stands up here before you and insists that you hear me when I tell you that there is nothing Christian about the idea that you're going to live this lovely, perfect life where no one's ever going to come against you, okay? There's nothing Christian about that idea. And somehow believers get it into their minds, if I love Jesus and if I know Jesus and if I walk with Jesus, then everyone's going to be nice to me and hand me flowers all the time, as if life's just going to go great. And then so many of us just act stunned and surprised when people come against us, when people hurt us, when they stab us in the back, when they lie about us, when roommates feel like they're manipulating us, when coworkers seem like they don't have your best interest in mind, when someone on your team says something about you, when that girl gossips about you, when that guy starts doing things that frustrates you. We tend to act like this is some big shock and surprise.
But ultimately, going all the way back to Jesus, there are going to be people who stand against you. And as much as that can sound sad or negative or discouraging, it's actually encouraging for me to know that it's not about me. It's not like if I was a better Christian, then people would never be mean to me. Jesus was the best Christian ever, and people were coming at him. People are coming at Jesus with swords and clubs, a big mob of people coming after him. And the reason I bring this up is because you are going to face people in your life who frustrate you, who betray you, who stab you in the back, who hurt you, who leave you, who do all kinds of things to you. And what I want to tell you is that one of the most important things about your Christian faith is how you respond to those people. Like everyone responds well to their friends. To the people who love you and shower you with blessings and compliments, everyone loves those people. That doesn't make you special. What makes you a Christian, what makes you unique, what makes us as Christians different isn't the way we respond to the people who are good to us, it's how we respond to the people who do evil to us. We are called to respond in a different kind of way, and that's what this story is going to start to unpack. How do we respond to the people who stand against us? When a mob, when a crowd armed with swords and clubs comes against us, how do we respond? I want to see how Jesus responds here. Here's what it says in verse 48. It says, "Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him." Going at once, to Jesus, Judas said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus replied, "Do what you came for, friend." Then the men stepped forward, seized Jesus, and arrested him. Here's what happens in this moment. Judas leads a mob with swords and clubs. He leads this group of people up to Jesus. He walks up to Jesus, and in one of the greatest betrayals in history, in fact, the one that shaped history more than any other betrayal, he walks up and kisses Jesus on the cheek and says, "Greetings, Rabbi." He sends that signal to the mob. This is the one that you want to arrest. And here's the question I hope we're reflecting on. Here's the question I'd like you to reflect on and ask tonight. The question is this: why did Judas do this? What did Judas actually have to gain? There's a story in the scriptures that Judas was given 30 pieces of silver, but to me, that's not an easy enough explanation to, he's fully in on Jesus, and someone's like, "You want some money?" He's like, "Sure, I'll betray him." I just don't think that lines up. You see, somewhere along the way, Judas started to get frustrated with the whole Jesus movement. Judas signs up for the Jesus movement thinking that Jesus is supposed to be the Messiah, which he is. The word Messiah is ultimately the word we get Christ from. Jesus is the Christ. He's the Messiah. And everyone signs up for him. And a few of those people who signed up thought that Jesus would be a Messiah in a political sense. See, if you don't know how this works, in the Old Testament, there's the nation of Israel, and that is a nation that stands on its own as the people of God and a light to the world. And that by the time Jesus comes onto the scene, the Roman Empire has taken over the entire Mediterranean world, including Israel. So Israel is not its own nation, but rather it is occupied by Rome. Rome has its foot over Israel. And what everyone believed at this time is there would be a Messiah who would come, and this Messiah would raise up an army, rebel against the mighty empire of Rome, topple the empire of Rome, destroy the Death Star, and everyone would be happy until the First Order comes back. We don't understand that. Yeah, but you know what I mean? Like, that's what everyone thought would happen. The Messiah is going to raise up this army, and we're going to go fight. And that's why Judas signed up. Judas thought Jesus is going to establish a kingdom that is going to last forever. And then he starts to hear Jesus talk about this whole dying thing. He's like, "That's not right." He starts to hear Jesus talk about, "I'm going to get arrested." And he goes, "Okay, that's not right." So Judas starts to get frustrated with this because Judas doesn't realize that Jesus is going to set up a kingdom that lasts forever and cannot be shaken. It's just not what Judas thinks it is. That Jesus is going to put down an enemy, but that enemy isn't the Roman Empire. That enemy is death. See, that's what Judas doesn't realize. And so Judas gets frustrated. Judas gets disenchanted with the Jesus movement. And so he sees what Jesus is doing and he bails on it. My question for you is this: why did Judas betray Jesus? And the answer is simple: because Judas didn't trust Jesus. He didn't trust him. He didn't trust what Jesus was up to. He didn't trust that God knew exactly what he was doing through his son. And here's what happens. When we stop trusting God's plan, we start causing trouble and pain in people's lives. When we stop trusting God's plan, we start causing trouble and pain in people's lives. Because when we stop trusting God's plan, we start trying to control things. We start trying to do things on our own and make things the way they should be in our own mind and in our own heart. That's true of Judas, it's true of me, and it's true of you. The moments in your life where you have felt most out of control, when you don't trust God, you step in, you try to control things, and it causes more pain. When that boyfriend breaks up with you, or that girl doesn't respond to you, or that job doesn't hire you or give you a promotion, when you don't make that team, whatever that thing is that you feel like is out of your control, when you stop trusting God, you start trying to control people, and it always causes pain. I remember it was a couple years ago. There's a dear friend in my life who begins dating this girl, and in every way, right from the beginning, I just go, this is a disaster, this is a mess, this shouldn't be happening. I just don't want this to be happening. I saw all the things that were wrong with that relationship. And in that moment, I didn't think to myself, this person is in the hands of Almighty God, and he will take care of this friend. He will bless this friend. He is going to lead this friend. I instead go, I need to do something about this. And so I began controlling and angry. I had angry conversations with him face to face over the phone, was trying to just shame him into breaking up with this girl. Ended up talking with the girl for a while and said some things that I never get to take back. Hurtful things that I just never get to take back. I acted in ways that just caused pain, wreaked havoc. That's not a thing. Words are hard. But I just hurt. I just caused so much pain in this relationship. And listen, later these two broke up, and you could say, well, that helped them break up. No, what that actually did was cause damage that's still there in the relationship. Because in that moment, I didn't trust God. And so I reached in and I tried to control things. I tried to be God in that moment. You see, when we stop trusting God, we start causing trouble. When we stop trusting God, we start hurting people. And that's what Judas is doing here. And then before we move on from Judas, I just want to point out this little thing that Judas is walking up to Jesus. He's kissing him on the cheek, which reminds me that sometimes the people who look like they're closest to Jesus actually don't trust him at all. Sometimes the people who are talking about God all the time aren't actually the people who trust him. In this moment, Judas is right up next to Jesus, and everyone would assume that he is the closest with Jesus in this moment, when in fact, Judas's heart could not be further away. And I just wonder, and I don't know, and I'm not picking on anyone, I just wonder if there's anyone in this room who looks like you're so close to Jesus, who you look like you have it all together, but inside you have no trust, you have no confidence that Jesus has your life, and that plays out in you trying to control everyone around you. This is what Judas's problem is. He doesn't trust Jesus. And then it goes on this way. Jesus gets arrested. It says they seize him. Verse 51, it says, with one of that, Jesus' companion reached for his sword. He drew it out and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. So later we're going to learn in a different gospel that this is Peter who drew out his sword and strikes the guy on the ear, which means he's either the best or worst shot in the world, right? Like either he's the worst shot ever and he aims for his head and hits his ear, or he was aiming for the guy's ear and got it. Like, I don't know which it was, but it was just, here's Peter, and he's like, I'll get your ear. I don't know what his plan was there, but that's what he does. And here's my question that I want you to consider. Why did Peter pull out his sword? Why did he pull out his sword in that moment? Now, I want to take away an answer that you might be assuming in this moment, because it's important that we take away this answer. And I want to tell you that Peter did not pull out his sword because it was self-defense. Peter wasn't trying to defend himself and Jesus. Peter wasn't acting in self-defense. The reason is because of what the text says. The text says that there is a group of people who have clubs and swords, and they're walking up to Jesus, but it never says they use them. These people have weapons, but it never says they actually pull them out. It never says they actually use them. You see, there can be people in life who are scary and who are intimidating, who look like they're going to hurt you, but they haven't actually hurt you. Right now, we don't have Peter acting in self-defense. And here's why this is so important. Because this entire night, I'm trying to talk to you about what it means for you to be a peacemaker in this world. For you to respond to people who are coming after you or the people around you in a peaceful way that causes peace to flourish in this world. But the last thing I would want you to start to believe is that somehow that means you should be a doormat. The last thing I would want you to believe is that that means you should let people hurt you. Like, listen, ladies, if you are walking down the street and a man comes and assaults you, you have every biblical warrant to push back and fight back. If you are ever in a situation, men or women, where you are in a place where you are being harmed or hurt, where someone is harming or hurting someone, you push back. You fight back. I believe if we are a nation, our nation or some other nation that gets attacked, a city or some other city that gets attacked, that there is a warrant, even a biblical warrant, for self-defense. I want to say this, there are people who are pacifists. Perhaps you're 100% pacifist in this room. You believe there's never an excuse to hit back, punch back, or fight back as a nation. I want to tell you that I hear where that comes from. I appreciate the consistency. I just don't think you can make that case 100% from the Bible. This is not a sermon that says you are to be abused or hurt or harmed and just let people continue to do that to you. That is not what I want to say tonight, because that's not why Peter fought back. Peter didn't fight back because he was being fought. It doesn't say anywhere in the text that anyone was attacking Peter. It just says they were arresting Jesus. You see, Peter fought back ultimately because Peter was in the same mind that this is the moment that Jesus is going to start the rebellion. See, Peter believed the same thing Judas did, that Jesus wasn't up to set up an eternal kingdom that would defeat sin, but he believed Jesus was setting up a kingdom to defeat Rome that would last forever. And so Peter stands there and he sees this mob of people coming and he sees Jesus and he's about to get arrested. And he goes, oh gosh, we got to start the fight now, because this is the moment we take down the mighty Roman Empire and we're going to rise up and take power. He pulls out his sword and he aims for the strangest thing you could aim for in the ear. This is what Peter does. So here's what I want to say about Peter. Why did Peter pull out his sword? Because Peter didn't trust Jesus. Peter didn't trust Jesus either. See, Judas is betraying Jesus, and Peter is pulling out his sword to try to defend Jesus, thinking he has to do that. And neither of the characters in the story so far actually trust what Jesus is up to. And so therefore, both of them cause violence and pain and disruption in other people's lives. Neither of them trust Jesus, and so it leads them toward causing pain toward other people. And I'll remind you that when you don't trust God's plan in your life, you will try to take control of things and you will cause pain. It goes on this way. After he cuts the guy's ear off, it says in verse 52, Jesus is speaking. It says, "Put your sword back in its place," Jesus said to him. Jesus looks and he says, put your sword back in his place. And in this moment, Jesus steps into this role as peacemaker. He steps into this role as the man who is causing peace to happen. He's not just experiencing peace inside of himself, but rather he is making peace happen in the midst of this situation. I want to walk you through 3 ways right now Jesus, in this particular story, is making peace. Number one, Jesus' example of peacemaker, he trusts God. He trusts his Father. In this moment, Jesus isn't wondering if he's supposed to be arrested or not. He knows that God has a plan for his life, and he knows what that plan is. He is walking by faith and confidence, even though it is a scary moment, even though it is a tense moment. He trusts God. That's what Jesus does. Number 2, he doesn't escalate it. He doesn't escalate the tension. Jesus doesn't say, hey guys, grab your swords. Hey, you guys back off. Jesus isn't escalating the tension here. He isn't making things worse in this moment. See, Jesus is trusting God, which allows him to not need to escalate the tension. You watch Jesus in this moment, and he is this calming presence in the midst of a very tense and a very painful scene. But then here's the thing you need to know about Jesus. For Jesus to make peace, it's not enough for him to just trust God and not escalate the tension. The third thing is that he calls for peace. He actively calls for peace. He doesn't just stand back and let things happen and kind of hope it happens. He calls for peace here where he says, put your sword away. Put it back in its place. Jesus trusts God. He doesn't escalate the tension, and he calls for peace. And tonight I want to stand here and tell you that in every single relationship of your life, you have the capacity to either be a troublemaker that causes pain and friction and destruction in people's lives, or you can be a peacemaker. And you get to make that decision. Let's think of it this way. Let's start with this example. We're going to start with the example of friend groups or workplaces. You could say your roommates. If you're living in college or you're out of college and you have some roommates, your group of friends, the people you work with, the people you're on a team with, these are the friends you have chosen to surround your life with. And now occasionally, I work with high school students. I know that high school students can be really dramatic, but my assumption, what I've learned is no drama ever happens in college or as a young adult. It all just dissipates in that moment, right? Right? We can all just believe that lie for a moment. And so drama happens in your friend group. It happens with your roommate. The roommate who doesn't do the dishes, or the roommate who doesn't pay that bill, or the friend who didn't invite you to that thing, or the person who just doesn't respect the fact that group chats aren't for sending things all the time. Like whoever that thing is, right? There's that person who's causing drama, that person who's causing pain. There's a friend group that has some friction. There's people who live together, and there's friction in there. How do we respond in this moment? And here's what I'd call you to. Number one, trust God. Number one, trust God. I know someone probably wronged you. I know they're probably supposed to put the milk not in the door because that's less cold. It doesn't matter. Like, trust God. Trust that he's doing something in the midst of it. Even when you feel left out, even when you feel betrayed, even when you feel bummed out, even when you feel like you're not getting what you deserve, lay down those rights and trust that God is bigger than all of this. God's bigger than your drama. He's bigger than that friction. He's bigger than that relational damage that's been done. You trust God. And then number two is you don't escalate the tension. You don't do it. You refuse to participate. When your coworker walks into your office or over to your cubicle and says, hey, did you hear about that thing? You'll never believe what happened. And there's that quiet voice that starts tapping because you're gossiping, but you're not supposed to. And then you're kind of talking about it. You can choose in that moment to say, you know what? That's just not something I want to talk about. I'm just not going to do it. I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to get into that. If a group chat starts flying around and you just feel like it's destructive, you can just decide you're not going to participate in that. You're not going to be a part of that. You're going to remove yourself from situations where the tension is escalating. You're not going to escalate the tension. And then the third thing that you would do is that you would actively call for peace. Hear me on this. It is not enough in your life that you don't cause drama. To be a peacemaker is to step into the drama and call for peace. It is not enough that you have kind of self-righteous, prideful, like, well, I'm not involved in the drama, so I don't need to be a part of that. That's one way of going about life, but if you want to be the peacemaker that Jesus is being here, you step into it. You say things like, hey, is there anything I can do to make things better? Actually, some of the words, if you're writing down notes right now, some of the best words I've ever learned to speak with every relationship that ever hurts in my life is to walk up to someone and say, things aren't good between us. How can I help make them better? I want things to be better. I say this to my wife all the time. I say this to friends when we're hurting. I say this to family members. I want things to be better. How can I help do that? You call for peace. When a group chat's going around, again, we can pretend this is like a teenager high school thing, but we can just really say that this is an all of us thing. We just get more sophisticated at hiding our drama as adults, right? But when that's flying around and that's happening, you can choose to just step in and say, hey, you know what, guys, we're gossiping right now, and we need to be done with that. At your workplace, you can just decide, hey, guys, we're assuming the worst about our bosses right now, and we just need to stop that right now. I'm assuming the worst, perhaps for you, about, maybe I'm assuming worse about my church right now, and we need to stop that right now. You can choose to actively step in and be part of the peace process for your friends and for your roommates. Some of you walked in here tonight. There's something going on with a friend, something going on with a roommate back home, maybe something going on with a friend or a roommate who's in this room right now. And if you want to be a peacemaker, you get to be the type of person who walks up to them after this church service and says, things aren't good. I want them to be better. How can I help do that? Let's take it from friends on to the next group of people, and that's the wild and crazy group of people that you grew up with, that gave you birth, that you have in your family. It's your parents, it's your siblings, it's your crazy Aunt Susie, it's your crazy Uncle Jimmy. It's that person in your life who's just wacko. And things are tense between you because families are tense and we all make each other's lives miserable, and so something's going on. How do I be a peacemaker with my family? Some of you live at home. Some of you wish you did not live at home, but you do. And you go home tonight, and things are tense and things are awkward. What do? 3 things. Number 1, you trust God. You trust that God is sovereign. As tough as this may sound, you trust that God puts you in this family for a reason. You stop wishing you were in someone else's family. You stop wishing your family was just like the family across the street, or the family of your roommate in college, or the family of your best friend, or the family of your girlfriend. You start believing that God puts you in this place, and even if painful things are happening, even if you've had to take action to remove yourself from that, you believe that God has put you here and God is doing something and he's at work, which allows you to not escalate the tension, which allows you to not have to argue with your sister every time she steals your shoes. You just don't have to do that anymore. right? That doesn't have to be a thing you do. You don't have to go toe-to-toe with your dad on everything you disagree with him on. You don't have to tell your mom every time she's annoying you. You don't have to do that anymore. We don't escalate the tension. And then the final thing is this: you call for peace. You call for peace. Yeah, it's getting real. Because here's what this may mean. I think some of you probably need to pick up a phone this weekend and call your parents. Say, things haven't been good and I hope they get better. Now hear me. Some of you that's not going to happen. Some of you that can't happen. Some of you that shouldn't happen because of things that have happened before. But I need to tell you that for some of you, you need to actually have a phone call this weekend and says, things have been bad. I want them to be better. How can I help do that? What can I do to make things better in our relationship? Some of you need to pick up the phone and call your brother, call your sister, talk to that family member who's hurt you. Talk to that person in your family where things have been bad. It's not enough for you just to say, my family's dysfunctional and I don't participate. That's okay, and maybe you need that for a season if there's been some abuse or some pain or something like that. But let me tell you, to make peace is to step into that family drama and say, I don't know how to fix everything and I'm not going to try to control you. I just want things to be better. How can I do that? That's calling for peace. But some of you need to do exactly that this weekend, because that's the model Jesus gives to us. Final one I want to show you. We're called to be peacemakers in our culture. And here's what I mean. Any of us who have social media in any form know what happens. Someone has an opinion about something in this world. It can be something as small as Chick-fil-A breakfast is God's gift to humanity, or something as, it's true, and it could be something as large as who you voted for president. Ooh, it just got quiet. So someone posts an opinion. You know how this works online. Someone posts an opinion. Someone else says, hey, I have a different opinion. And very quickly that person is narrow-minded, bigoted, angry, stupid, ridiculous, doesn't even know how to spell. And then there's an argument that goes back and forth, and everyone gets so angry, and then people who weren't even part of the argument pile into that argument, and at the end, everyone's dumber. Like, that's it. No one's mind has been changed. This is our world, right? Like, it's so discouraging to jump on social media and sometimes and just see the hate and the anger and the absolute just rage that exists on social media. By the way, here's the thing. I'm not against social media. I love social media. I even heard people this week say, social media is changing us. We're becoming more angry. And I'm convinced social media is not changing us. It's revealing us. We were always this way. All of us have always had that rage inside of our hearts. Now we just have an outlet for it. So how do you do this? How do you be a peacemaker on social media? Here's how it begins. You trust God. Can I just give you some freedom right now? Not everyone is going to vote like you vote, and that's okay. Not everyone's going to believe exactly what you believe, and that's okay. Not everyone is going to behave just like you behave. Not everyone is going to date exactly who you would date, and that's okay, and you don't have to comment on everything. You trust God. Because you believe that God is at work in that person and God is at work in me, and we're both on a journey. You trust God. And then the second thing is you don't escalate the tension. Let's say you post an opinion. Again, it could be an opinion just as small as Coke is great and Pepsi is the worst. It could be something like that. It's true. Or it could be as big. Or it could be as big as something that you believe about God and wish everyone would. Let's say you post something online and someone posts a response that they hate you and you're the worst person ever, and what you said means they're not gonna put your name on the list for the Christmas cards, which don't exist anymore. But that's not gonna happen anymore. How do you respond? You don't escalate the tension. You don't fire back. You know what the best thing to do sometimes is to not respond at all, or to not respond for 24 hours. To just allow yourself to breathe and not take the invitation. I had a mentor once who said, you don't have to accept every invitation to every fight you're invited to. And I love that. That is true. Just because someone posts something online that disagrees with your worldview doesn't mean you have to fight them. In fact, it means you probably shouldn't fight them. Okay, you don't escalate the tension. And the final thing is always, you call for peace, which could mean you stepping in on a social media platform and someone's angry at you or someone's angry at what you said, and you just say, hey, you know what, it sounds like you have a different perspective for me. Why don't I buy you a cup of coffee next week and we can talk about it? Why don't you share your thoughts with me? I want to learn what you have to say. What if that happened in our culture? What if every time someone disagreed, there was like a healthy conversation that happened about it? Not over 140 characters, not over text message, not over Facebook, not over any of these things, but what if it happened in person where there was listening and talking going? What if we called for peace? Imagine what our culture would look like if not just us, but if millions and millions of Christians in the United States decided we were going to behave in this kind of way. If we said we're not going to escalate the tension, why? Because we trust in God. We're not going to escalate that tension. We're going to call for peace. That's the call of Jesus on your life. That's what Jesus does in the Garden of Gethsemane. He sees Peter pull out the sword. He sees the mob, and he calls everyone to peace. He says, put away your sword. It continues on this way. He says, for all who draw the sword will die by the sword. Do you not think I can call the Father, and at once he will put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? He starts with this. He says, all who draw the sword will die by the sword. Everyone who draws the sword is going to die by it. That's true in war back then. It is true now. The people who carry guns into war are more likely to get killed in war. People involved in organized crime are more likely to get killed by organized crime. And people who decide to use their words as weapons online or in person are more likely to get hurt by words. That was true back then. It's true right now. And here's why I'm emphasizing this so much. I have a concern for this sermon. I have a concern for every sermon I will preach in this 6-week series. My concern is that you are hearing about Judas and Peter type people who stir up anger, and you hear about Jesus. And my concern for some of you is that some of you are listening to this sermon thinking about who you would like to email a YouTube video of the sermon to later. Because she really needs to hear this. You're like hoping your roommate's watching on the live stream back there, like, I hope they're on right now. They really need to hear this. That's my concern right now. That you're sitting here thinking, I never cause problems, it's always everyone else. And my deepest desire, like I wish I had a mirror up here right now to just hold and say, hey, listen, this is who needs to hear the sermon tonight. It's you. It's me. Gosh, our hearts are endlessly deceptive, and you think you never cause the problems and you never cause the pain, and it's always someone else. And I'm here just to tell you tonight that if you hear nothing else in this sermon series of everything we talk about, I want you to think about you. I want you to think about how you respond to people. Are you stirring up trouble, or are you calling for peace? It is so easy to hope someone else will call for peace in this world, and it takes so much courage for you to be the one who doesn't. See, this is what's happening here. You jump down to this next verse. Jesus says in verse 53, he says, do you not think I could call my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? You know what Jesus is reminding us of here right now? Jesus isn't calling for peace because he's weak. Jesus is calling for peace because he is unspeakably strong. The people who call for peace in this world aren't doormats. They're not weak. They're not the people who get manipulated and walked all over. The people who are actually peacemakers in this world are unspeakably strong, and they know it. They know they could inflict pain on this person, but they choose to trust God, not escalate things and call for peace. They know it. And that's what Jesus is saying here. Jesus is saying, listen, I'm not calling for peace because I'm weak. In a moment, I could snap my fingers, and more angels than you could possibly imagine would slaughter all of you. But I'm not going to do it because that's not what I've come here to do. Jesus is reminding them he's not calling for peace because he's weak. He's calling because he is unimaginably strong. And here's how we'll finish. Our band's going to come up, and we're going to close by singing a few songs here. But here's how it finishes. It says in verse 54, it says, how then would the scriptures be fulfilled? It says it must happen in this way. Verse 55, in that hour Jesus said to the crowd, am I leading a rebellion that you have come to me with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I sat in the temple courts teaching, and you did not arrest me. But this has all taken place that the writings of the prophets may be fulfilled. Jesus is saying, listen, I'm going to get arrested right now. Jesus is saying, listen, I'm going to get arrested right now, but you need to know that it wasn't your plan. This wasn't your plan. You didn't come up with this plan to arrest me. God knew this was going to happen. God didn't just know this was going to happen. God planned this to happen. You see, he references these writings, and if you don't know, these writings are the entire Old Testament. Where so often, thousands of years before Jesus was born, there would be these authors who would sit down and God would direct their pens that they might write out these prophecies about who Jesus would be. This is 1,000 years, a millennia before Jesus was born. And here's what a guy named Isaiah writes in Isaiah 53. He says this. He's writing, he says, who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? It says he grew up like a tender shoot, like a root out of dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain, like one from people whom people hide their faces. He was despised and we held him in low esteem. Verse 4, but surely he took up our pain. He bore our suffering, yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. We all like sheep have gone astray. Each of us have turned to our own way, but the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. 1,000 years before Jesus was born, someone named Isaiah sat down and wrote a prophecy about a man who would bear the iniquity of us all, about a person who would be pierced for our transgressions, who would be punished for our sin, who would be crushed for our iniquities. He sits down and he writes about that. And so that the scriptures may be fulfilled, Jesus says, I need to be clear that he was talking about me. And that Jesus steps in and he does something in this moment that is miraculous, something in this moment that changes the course of history. Jesus goes to the cross, and on that cross, through the wounds of Christ, we receive peace with God through Christ's blood. That the good news of the gospel, for those of you that don't know, the heart of Christian faith isn't be really good and God will accept you. The good news of the gospel is that because of what Christ has done for you on the cross, God sees you, and rather than punishing you for your sins, he welcomes you into his family. That all of us have people, all of us as sinners have rebelled against the God of the universe, and rather than hurting us because he is unimaginably strong, he has chosen instead to send Jesus to be the peacemaker between us and God. If you're going, I can't make peace with my roommate, I can't make peace with my dad, I can't make peace with that friend, I can't make peace with the people in this world. God said, I can't make peace with them unless my son dies. And he sends Christ that he might absorb the punishment of God's wrath, absorb the penalty of God's sin, so that God made peace with you. And when you step into a relationship with Christ, that peace that God gives you enables you to make peace with people in this world. That God crossed a great divide and overcame a great problem, that he might make peace with you so that you would be sent into this world to be a peacemaker. And God accomplishes the impossible because he was pierced for our transgressions, crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we're healed. And that's the invitation for your life. That you would step into every relationship you have and make peace. The same peace that was offered to you by Christ through his blood shed on the cross. I pray for you. Let's respond in worship. God, tonight I come before you on behalf of everyone in this room who's walking through drama and pain and heartache, who have family members and coaches and leaders in their organization, bosses, whoever it is in their life, roommates, God, whatever drama or friction is going on, I pray that through the same Spirit that made peace between us and you, Father, that you would allow us to make peace in this world, that you would allow us to be peacemakers, that you would allow our relationships to thrive because we know you. God, may this be a church, may this be a young adult ministry that is known for making peace in a world that is chaotic and out of control. God, would you do that through the power of your Holy Spirit? It is welcome here, God. We trust you. We love you. We pray this in the mighty resurrected name of Jesus. And everyone said real loud,